My why is because I believe every single person deserves to be heard. That every single person has greatness within them.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Master Your Life, a podcast dedicated to powerful stories of grit and determination in ways that we can succeed and create mastery and legacy and impact through our challenges, living in grace in who we are and who we came here to be. And welcome, Matthew. Nice to see you today.
Nobody's called me Matthew for a while. It's fine though. That is my name. Hi,
Great
Kate.
name.
Good to be here today. Thank you for having me. And thank you for all the compassion and work and love that you give to all of us in the world.
It's my honor, and it just comes from the flow of being in the work and wanting to have other humble warriors along on the journey. Because you know what? It's lonely alone, right, Matt?
It is lonely alone. I think we forget that. So many of us work alone and we think that it's annoying interacting with other people sometimes. But at the end of
Yes,
the day, we're meant to be not alone all the time.
true. And that's pretty much the first pillar of your program. So I'm just going to do a little intro on you, Matt, because we just went right on into it. Because before we hit play, I was like, wait a second, we got to stop talking. I got to hit play. So you guys all just jumped in on a really powerful conversation that Matt and I were having. And that's the beauty of podcasting, isn't it, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, there's really no right or wrong way to do this. One of my favorite podcasts is Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard. It's just like funny. It's like that's a lot different than most of them, So we just want to hear people's
Yeah.
stories.
I love that uniqueness. So, Matt, you have had a background, quite a diverse background, very successful background in the business realm of making money and growing business, and really have financially built a life for yourself. But yet, just before I hit play, you said that you did it wrong. So tell me about that. First of all, tell me about your success and what you did. And then where do you think you would have done it different if you were talking to a younger version of the big MG?
Sure. So I'm successful. I mean, I'm successful by society's measures. I've always been a saver. My parents taught me to save money. They saved, always saving for tomorrow. And I did that. And I'd always been a top performer at work. I landed into sales. And I think sales is nice if you can do it because you are most in control of your own destiny financially.
Why do you think you went there, Matt? It's not
Um,
easy, because the reason why I say that is because it's not for the faint of heart, right? You have to be extraordinarily resilient to get those no's. So I'm just curious, what drove you into that business?
You know what? No one's ever asked me it exactly like that. I went where the wind took me. I remember when I got my first sales job, they were convincing me, like, no, you could do this. Like they saw things in me that I couldn't see in myself. It's interesting that you asked. I mean, I just realized, and this is where the story's going. Like, I had no agency over myself. Like, I wasn't able to make any decisions. Like, I don't know that I had any dreams for myself. I definitely couldn't have told you at like 16 or 18 that there was a profession that sounded good. I went to school to kind of be an accountant, which is so opposite of sales. And it's so funny. I did like numbers and I still do like numbers. But yeah, I was on monster.com just applying for jobs and I remember like in hindsight now, like I was aiming below my capability, and I took a job at a metal distribution company. So you would never know that there's like 100 companies that can deliver steel next day to people in Los Angeles if you wanted to. But it was actually like probably one of the hardest jobs I've ever had. It was negotiating, it was a call center, you're making out calls. And my boss, like when I interviewed, they're like, no, 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 no. Like they saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. They're like, you'll be able to
What
do
was
it.
that?
I mean, looking back, like I probably walked in with a perfectly formatted resume. I sent a thank you note. I looked professional. I was on time, and now that I manage people, like a lot of people suck,
But back
like
then, though, I think it's more than heart that they saw, Matt.
yeah, I mean, they saw probably me, like that I was always a hardworking, lovely, like kind person. And I think they liked me and they saw that in me. And
Mm.
in hindsight, like the boss of the metal distribution center, he was a gay man as well. I'm an older gay man. And I think he was like, oh, another gay person. There's not many gay people that sell metal. So, um, But like I think
You
that he
never
really,
know, Matt.
I mean,
I guess
well,
you know.
no, I mean, I worked for the biggest metal distribution company in America. I was closeted at work, and then I went to go work for another smaller company that wasn't that small. I don't think there was a single other gay person there as well.
I have a question for you in regards to that
Yeah.
because this is an important thematic. The armor to which you have to wear in life, whether it's from being gay, whether it's from trauma from childhood, whatever it is, how would you describe your armor then? What were you protecting?
My family, probably. I didn't think that I was allowed to feel or acknowledge the truth of what my upbringing did to me.
So powerful. Yeah. And so you trudged on like a good soldier, didn't you?
Yeah. I mean, I chased money, I mean, but I wasn't like looking to like buy a boat, although nothing wrong with that. Um, but
What about a Porsche?
a Porsche is nice. Yes. I have a story about why I have a Porsche. I can share that in a few minutes. I never really made great money until I moved to New York in 2010. I have friends that were doing pharmaceutical sales and making, $80,000, $90,000 a year when I was working as hard as they were making 50, 60. Not that that's nothing, but like I lived in LA. It wasn't like amazing money back then. I didn't travel. A vacation was like driving to San Francisco, you know? And yeah, so I was just always like safety came in the form of money. And if there was money in the bank account, then things were okay. And then I moved to New York in 2010, and this was the first big risk I had taken. The metal distribution company was not doing so well after 2008, and our compensation was slashed dramatically because they had to. And so I went to New York and fell into the baby product business. I worked for an entrepreneur. The company grew from like 3 million to $100 million extremely quickly. I learned so much. I had so much fun. My pay went to, $150,000 a year. I think like we were getting like something like maybe $2,000 or $3,000 extra each month just for hitting our goals. Like I had never seen like this kind of like compensation. It wasn't that I was balling out of control or anything, but like it was nice to like, I mean, I enjoyed having extra money to do things. And that's when I started traveling and eating out at nice places. And I always saved. I always spent less than what I had earned. But it kind of just, I guess I just thought that that money, as long as the bank account was full and fuller and fuller, then like that would solve my problems.
Mm.
And I never acknowledge. I mean, and really, like, I never got to know myself. I never got to make decisions for me. And I'm a big Oprah fan, and she says that life will keep sending you wake up calls until you finally listen. They'll just keep bumping you upside the head until you listen. And finally, quite certain there had been wake up calls my whole life that I just couldn't hear. And then finally, they got loud enough where I had to listen
The
and go.
cosmic two by four.
The cosmic two by four,
The
yes.
cosmic two by four, as I like to call it. So, what was that for you, Matt?
Yeah, so I was living in New York and I had met my partner David. We're still together. It's been 12 years. It was my first like really good relationship. I mean I dated other nice guys, but we were young and it wasn't anything like we were both like yeah, nothing really remarkable there. And then David, my partner, and I mean, relationships, require, I think that's like when you grow the most, when you're in relationship with somebody. So that was happening. And then I started my own business. I was laid off from a job, which really wasn't like super tragic. I had made a lot of money at the job. I knew it was coming. The company was like, there was warning signs but I was frantic. Like this was not the end of the world. And I was absolutely frantic about it. And I started my own business. And I did this in a direction that I really had no interest in going. It was in baby products. I was going further into a path that, and there's nothing wrong with baby products, to be clear. Like this isn't like it's not a bad industry. It's just, I mean, there was nothing wrong with it. It just really wasn't like what I wanted to do anymore. So I went all in on it. One of my biggest values is excellence. And I continue to drive my business towards success. Month one, I was making 5 digits. The first year, I had made $200,000, and the second year, 300, and I grew it all the way to where I was earning $1 million a year. which is insane. I mean, I never thought this would happen. When I started the business, the cosmic 2x4 came for me. And I started having anxiety. I went to the doctor. I didn't know it was anxiety. Kind of a spoiler alert there, but I started having a lot of health problems. I was worried all the time. And I went to the doctor and she diagnosed me with high blood pressure. And I knew that that was like weird because my grandparents had high blood pressure. I'd always like noticed that the doctor was like, oh shit, mine's very low. That's amazing. And it wasn't anymore. And then I started freaking out about that, really worried about what was happening. And I was drinking and smoking cigarettes at the time and marijuana to sleep. And like, I knew that like all of this stuff wasn't helping me. But at the same time, like, I couldn't do much about it. And my doctor even said, she's like, honestly, I am like way less concerned with you smoking cigarettes and drinking to cope right now than, I mean, you're being so hard on yourself. If you were to quit, like this would be like, yes, you need to not be doing this so much, but like, let's ease up on the self-flagellation here.
Mm.
And then I started taking Lexapro, which just, I want to totally caveat for those types of medications, you do often have to try a few things until you find the right one. And it can be very difficult. And it was very difficult. I felt horrible after trying it. And I tapered off with the doctor's permission, which you're very much supposed to tell your doctor how you're feeling. And I just became I mean, I wasn't okay to try another one. I was felt so horrible. And then it started turning into, I mean, I was very depressed. I became suicide. I mean, I knew that I guess I knew that I wouldn't hurt myself, but I worried that I would because I was just in so much pain and there was nowhere to go. Like there was nowhere to go for help. There was emotional help. Like my family loved me. My partner like loved me and but it was really financial. I felt like I really thought that I was going to have to live under a bridge. I remember thinking that very
Mm.
much, being like, if I don't like make money, and it was very all or nothing. Like
Very
there
fatal
wasn't,
stick. So this is a common thematic because, as you know, we sort of work in the same market as coaching high performers and men, for me in particular. And this thematic of the financial fear is just something that eventually does implode. But from a perspective of the male in general in our society, and I think it's a lot more innate than people give it credence, that there is a drive to protect and provide. It's like an innate drive. And I'm just curious on what is your experience now with that? Because your life did dismantle.
I have a really, I am really proud of my relationship with money and things, considering, or the progress rather. I don't feel very tied to things. Like you mentioned, I have a Porsche. I do have a Porsche because this anxiety started manifesting in a panic attack so bad that I couldn't drive for a few years. And I had money, and I was like, well, if I get a Porsche, this is certainly the best chance I have of getting behind the wheel. And it worked. Use.
Awesome. I love that story. So why was that so significant? Because that's such a trip, isn't it? That, like what engine, what we choose to drive through, even as a metaphor, right? And so what was that for you? That you
I
didn't want to
started
waste not driving it?
I started giving that was the first thing I'd ever given myself that I didn't need, like something excessive, like something really excessive. And to be honest, like my business is making me $1 million a year. I could absolutely afford this car. I could have bought two of them if I wanted to. We're kind of jumping a little bit, but before that happened, my parents and I had a big falling out where we stopped talking, and we went about 3 years without talking, and that gave me the opportunity to heal. I was like, as these panic attacks started happening, the depression, the anxiety, I was very compliant with the doctor's orders, going to therapy, and I became a yoga teacher, and it all led me to realize that I was avoiding the childhood trauma that I hadn't acknowledged.
Mm.
And, not everyone wants to heal and participate in the solution. So my parents and I had a falling out. And then I was uninhibited. For the first time, I didn't have to listen to anybody's feedback on what I was doing. And
Wow.
and I went
Unconstrained.
and I bought a Porsche, and, it was crazy. It helped me. I mean, I could have been fine probably without that one day, but it was like mentally like, let me buy myself something that I don't need for survival that I really want. And that's what
Gosh.
life is about. We're supposed to be able
Yeah, well,
to
it's just
figure.
such a powerful metaphor of the journey for you. And it's not the materialistic thing, it's just the symbolism of it, right? It's just a pretty symbol, but it is that. And so what was the moment, that pivot moment for you when the illusion, when the mask came off, when the armor fell away?
The pivotal moment where the armor fell away. Well, in couples therapy, right before I had the argument with my parents, the night before, it was a Friday night, my partner and I were in couples therapy. We had an amazing couples therapist. Anybody out there, couples therapy is very recommended by me. It has been so helpful in our relationship. And we don't go anymore right now. Maybe we will again, but it was just so nice to work on our relationship together. Long story short, we realized that I couldn't ask David for what I needed from him. I couldn't tell him what, and like the therapist, it was like this, it was a huge climax. The therapist, like, she was kind of aggressive in like a loving way. I was very comfortable with that. And she knew I was getting so much therapy on my own, and she got pushing. She's like, Matt, tell David what you need. Tell David what you need. And I like burst out into tears. And she's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. She's like, I thought you were like, I mean, I thought I didn't know this is where you were stuck, but I couldn't tell him what I needed. And then just like this burst, like, oh my God, I was punished growing up for my needs and I was abandoned at school. And I realized that, I mean, it was undeniable that what was holding me back was that I had had just all this repressed pain and trauma. And that had pushed me forward to be successful. I think that like we face this adversity. Most entrepreneurs, most world changers have faced, I mean, I would venture to say almost all of them have faced some sort of adversity. But if you don't deal with it, you burn out. Like essentially, like I was just on overdrive my whole life, and I didn't know how to sleep. I didn't know how to not worry. I didn't know how to trust. I mean, that's been the big thing over these past, I mean, this is probably my 2024 accomplishment, the biggest, I mean, which is probably the biggest yet, having faith that things will work out. And it's a practice. I'm doing way better than I expected, though. And just learning like that we don't have to control everything, and we do our best, and life works out the way it's supposed to.
So good. So what would you say to that younger self? And you can even take me back to that self that you said so powerfully, you were punished for your needs. What did
Yeah.
that Matt need to hear?
What would I say to the younger self? This is hard to acknowledge. I'm fine saying it, but I'm sure it's hard for other people in my family if they were to hear it. But what was happening to me, I needed help. And it was bad enough that I would tell that younger Matt to go get help, to go talk to somebody and tell them what's going on and how bad you need help and how it's not available at home and how misunderstood I was at home. And because when the story was like, I grew up, I mean, I knew I was loved. My mom made banana bread. The house was very clean. There was beautiful Christmas decorations all over the house. But at the end of the day, there was extreme overwhelm and unresolved trauma that hadn't been dealt with for generations. And it was just passed on. And that's the thing. I mean, I think that we can just ignore the pains of our childhood and just look forward. We pass it on to our kids or I mean, we pass it on to whoever we're around because we're angry, we're irritable, we're stressed, and we don't manage that well. And that's really kind of the story of my home life there was just so much that hadn't been dealt with that was passed on to me and taken out on me. And
Yes. Well, I
now,
believe that every family by nature has someone that is the sensitive natured one that has tried to manage by balancing the energy or intaking it and holding it. Your father's pain, your mother, whatever that pain is generation that's come through. And if we know that 90% of our thoughts are unconscious, right? And I think this is important for people to hear is that you were well loved, but that doesn't make it okay, right? It doesn't mean that you weren't loved, that they're not good people. And we don't have to necessarily throw the sword, but it seems as though, and I went through similar situation, that there comes a point where it's like, I cannot heal in this. I can no longer play that role of holding this. No, thank you. Here you go. I'm giving it back. And boy, is there a lot of resistance on the other side of having to no longer have you as the one that bears the burden of whatever that is. And any viewers or listening out there, viewers or listeners, I guarantee that there's something from your past, what role you played generationally, in the web. And who are you attracting? What are the people that you're attracting that are a reflection of your own sense of self-worth? And I think that a big part of it is everything that you heard when you were a child that you were two of is often the time where you actually are the most powerful. And Matt, what did you hear that you were two of when you described that you couldn't speak your needs? What was that two? Two what?
Too sensitive, too
Mm-hmm.
emotional, too needy, too selfish, too greedy. That's the gist of it. But in the
Isn't that
business,
intense? And
yeah,
and yet you were hired and you're in a beautiful relationship and you're out there doing good because of your sensitivity, because of your emotionality, because of your generosity of spirit and kindness.
yeah, since the argument with my parents that separated us for a few years, I had to learn to be proud of my success. And I know that you and I both love vulnerability and exploring what that means. And just for me, like I remember very clearly having to talk to my friends and like they're like, oh my God, congratulations on this and the house and all this stuff. And I said, honestly, I have so much shame for this. And my friends started to be like, oh my God, like why? Really? And I like told them, and it's just
Wow.
like going through it. Yeah, like growing up, like I was always made to believe that like be grateful for what you have and don't want anything more. And it wasn't exactly like said that, but like, we didn't grow up with money at all. And, me wanting an extra pair of shoes was probably very just too hard for my parents to solve. So it was just like blamed on me for wanting that second pair of
Yeah,
shoes. And that
don't ask.
translate,
Yeah,
don't
they're
ask me.
projected guilt. It's such a powerful thing. And I love the whole idea of people telling you a good job and you actually having the honesty to say, instead of, yo, like whatever, but just literally like, you have no idea. I have so much shame around that. Just that takes the lid off shame. And I want people to hear that point, because it's so true that shame can't live in the light. That
Mhm.
once you say, you know what, I have shame around this, all of a sudden you feel lighter. And I think that's the biggest part about breaking through psychological barriers, is understanding that, as I love to describe it in Brendon Bouchard, he says assertive vulnerability. I
Mhm.
like those two words together. And I think we talked about all this already, because there is an assertion. Vulnerability doesn't mean that you have no shape and form. It just means that you're willing to tell the truth and at the same time, if need be, protect yourself from unhealthy energy. So there is a shield around our vulnerability. And I think that's the part that people have lost. What's your perspective on that based on your system? Because obviously you're a coach, you're a consultant, you help people break through this trauma and be able to own their powerfulness. What would you
Mhm.
say about that? I want to actually hear about your process, about how you approach these conversations more than anything. I'm super curious.
Yeah, so I mean, I think vulnerability is the way. I mean, I'll address that. When I work with clients, a big part of this, and I work with people, a lot of men just like me, who have struggled to find their authenticity, what they really want for their lives. And some people can come in and they might be able to, after a couple of sessions, we uncover what they really want for their lives. And a big part of it is giving yourself permission, learning to give yourself permission for what you want for your life. And then we address really what's standing in the way of that. And a lot of times, like it points to limiting beliefs, things we've picked up in childhood. And for those of us that want to do something atypical, something a little bit against the grain, there are limiting beliefs. And we need to learn that, people ahead of us have done this. And that's really like, I wish there was a big secret to it, but a lot of it is just supporting my clients through this process of identifying these beliefs and then really helping them anchor to motivation and inspirations. Like I look at this all the time. Look at people ahead of me. Like when I look at how busy I am sometimes, I think about some CEO or something. I'm like, oh my God, they have like 10,000 more times things on their plate than I do. And they look like they sleep at night fine. Like
Mhm.
we can always grow to have the life that we want. There is endless possibilities for us to grow and learn, and I support my clients through that. I read all the time. If I had double the amount of hours in the day, I would spend, 24 hours a day reading. I mean, so I'm always learning and I'm always growing. I mean, growth is it's my biggest value. And I help my clients grow to meet what they want for themselves. And a big part of this, like at the end of this, like framework that I have, there are three big things that surround vulnerability. And it's learning how to be imperfect. It's learning to forgive yourself and to forgive others. And it's learning to live in abundance and to be shameless about having abundance, but also helping others have abundance. And those all surround vulnerability. And I like what you said. I mean, it's not just like, dumping out on social media horrible things. I mean, I guess like I don't even surround myself with that so much, but like I do think that what I needed more than anything was to be honest about my situation, my feelings. And really like the more that I started opening up about it after the 2x4 that happened, what did you call it?
Cosmic 2x4.
Cosmic 2x4 that happened. Like things were so bad. Like you hit this rock bottom where like you kind of have to start being vulnerable about things or you're gonna drive yourself absolutely crazy. And I just started talking to people, talking to friends. Hey, like this is what I remember about my childhood. I remember one of my friends like, ooh, like it's like mine wasn't perfect, but like no, like my dad never said that to me. Matt, that is bad, and that is something that you should be talking to your therapist about. And the more that you start opening up about things, the more that you realize that we are all in the same boat here. And that's one of the beautiful things about coaching, as I'm sure you see. We're all struggling with the same things. We all don't treat ourselves as good as we should. We all like need to be easier on ourselves. We all need to be more forgiving. We all need to allow more love and joy into our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the problem. Like, when I look at this unresolved trauma, that's what it is. Like, we're afraid to be vulnerable. Like, we're afraid, like, my dad, like, he wasn't willing to like be vulnerable and open up about his feelings. And it just keeps, it's like a pot, I mean, you're just putting like a lid on a boiling pot. And there's nothing wrong with letting other people in. I mean, that's life. And I think that we think we're all those of us who have been traumatized, which is most of us, I believe, when we're holding it in, like we're doing that because we think that we're not worthy of bringing it out. We think that we're alone, that nobody else has experienced this. All of us have experienced pain. And the more that we can connect with other people and allow that in, the more beautiful it is. Like you and I were speaking for a second before this about an author that we both enjoy, Glennon Doyle. And she's not probably the first person who said this, but like one of her things that she's talked about in terms of her parenting, it's like, we make mistakes and we just apologize for them after. Like apologies go so far. It's acknowledging that we're not perfect. And it's hard to learn that. So I support my clients through all of this and help them just embrace who they are and build the lives that they want for themselves and ask them what they want. A lot of us think it's more money, it's more power, it's generally more freedom. And freedom might come from like moving into a smaller house and having more time with our kids and being able to cook dinner for our families, you know? So
It can be that simple. So I have a question for you in regards to vulnerability, because once we go through this and we understand and we see the trauma and we identify that, and then you said, we have to accept the three big things you said was accepting imperfection and leaning into more of a deeper level of forgiveness of self and others, I assume. And then also leaning into the sense of abundance and how you can use that abundance to help others. I added that piece because you did say that, but where does that drop us off? Because the reason why I'm saying this is I just finished writing my book called The Agility Mindset, which is the subtitles Adapt or Die in a Rapidly Changing World. Because I do believe that we are coming on to radical change financially, emotionally, socially, that is going to have repercussions, and no socioeconomic will not be touched, right? It's going to go across all, worldwide, I believe. Some adjustment has to happen, this growth that we're on. Where does that drop us off?
No, I mean, I feel the same way. We're at a place right now where, we need to be embracing change. I don't want to be like completely dramatic, but like for anyone who's not going to be.
Did you hear my subtitle, Matt?
Yeah, I mean,
Do you think that's a little dramatic?
Well, I mean, it's just like our lives are going to dramatically change.
Yes.
For the worse if we cannot embrace change.
I agree.
I work predominantly with high performers, highly successful people, and we do have the bandwidth to be kind and to help others. Not everyone's going to be able to adapt to change as well as some of us are. And for me, like I look at this, like if I, make a business, I'm just making this up that generates $100 million a year or something, like then it's my responsibility to take care of other people and do good with that money. And I think that our biggest problem in society right now is that somebody has a business making $100 million a year and they think they deserve to keep 90% of that for themselves. And they're splitting the other 10% amongst 500 other people, which, I mean, honestly, to me, can I cuss on here?
Against anything you want.
It's just complete bullshit. Like, no one needs that kind of money.
That's my
Yeah.
first modular in brand builders. The first one is blowing up the myth of balance, but really it's balance is bullshit. It's no such thing. We're here to have impact. But I'm so glad that you shared that. So what would be, from where you are, and considering the fact that you've gone through your own journey of growth and transformation, you've gone through your own boot camp to build a stronger, more resilient Matt for you and your family, because I know you're looking to have a baby soon, which I can't freaking wait to hear about and see pictures in coming soon months. What's your marching orders right now for people? What do you want people to hear about how to prepare?
I mean, the cosmic 2x4 is coming for all of us, and it's a blessing if it does, I mean, for me, like I said this, and I love the way that this came out of my mouth. It's like, I was just skating north of rock bottom my entire life. And that's the worst place to be, in my opinion. Your life is not fulfilling. Yes, you're breathing, you're sleeping, you're smiling in some pictures. But hopefully the cosmic 2x4 is coming for everybody. And hopefully we catch it before it's less catastrophic than mine was. But we are all meant to be living a life of authenticity. And I know that's a tall order. Like, when I first heard the word purpose, I was like, what, purpose? And I asked friends, I was like, are you living are you living a life of purpose? And that's why we have coaches and therapists and people we work with. I am a firm believer this stuff cannot really be accomplished alone.
Absolutely not. And that's your number one thing. I saw that. And I'll be able to, you guys, everyone who's listening, make sure you tune in and find Matt. His website is his name, and that will all be in the show notes.
Thank you.
And so authenticity. And what else is going to keep us going, Matt?
I mean, figuring out how to live an authentic life, and then also the vulnerability piece, introspection and vulnerability and authenticity. Figure out what you want for your life, get to know yourself and live that life and be vulnerable. Let other people in, show them that they can do that as well. Take people along on the journey with you. Show your friends your fears. Let people in, because the more that we let our guards down, the more that we're showing others that it's okay to do that.
Does vulnerability build strength, Matt, for a man?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I see very few people taking vulnerability too far. I think that in general, the more that we can cry in front of our loved ones, letting people in, the better. I talk to my team, the people that I lead, and I'm definitely violating every management book written 40 years ago. But if the ship is sinking, I'm going to be like, guys, the ship is sinking right now. Like, we all need to band together and figure out how to do this. I'm not this fearless leader that has all the answers. I'm like, are you guys okay that I'm telling you that? And they're like, yeah, no, we prefer it. We actually would rather have you be honest.
They do. The generation, your generation does prefer it, unlike your dad's generation, right? And I think that's the part that I just want to finish up with, which is the whole concept of grace. And I think that you need to take that time away from your parents, just like I had to take away time from my family after my son passed, because they didn't understand who I was here to become through the loss of my son. I could no longer play the game. I couldn't play it anymore. I was just like, cease and desist order delivered. And so I think that through that journey, and then being able to come back and understand that you really gave your parents the gift of walking away. I would love it if you would look at that lens, because therefore then they were able to figure out what is in them and in each other. And sometimes that is super healing for the people we leave behind when we no longer become and hold the battering ram position in life. It's grace right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we all benefited from some time away. I think that at the end of the day, they definitely love me and want what's best for me. And I think that my mom told me the other day that my dad's proud of me for what I'm doing. I don't think he's listening to exactly what I'm saying, but I would have to imagine he gets the gist of me just being more authentic about my life. And I think that he probably can't be along for most of it. And I'm so glad that you asked this question because last night I had an epiphany and I'm just kind of so grateful to share it right now. My mom said something to me about a month ago and she said, I'm just so grateful that my kids are teaching me so much. And then last night I was reviewing my podcast episode. I have a podcast that everyone matters of the mind, rise to your worth. Um, and I was like, this is what she means. Like, she didn't know this stuff. She didn't know that, drinking water and going for a walk were great remedies when you're stressed out. No one showed her that. And I think my yoga teacher taught me this, and you brought this up earlier. It was honestly some of the best advice I've ever received, and it's both. Both can exist. Your parents can love you, and they also could have hurt you really bad, and you can acknowledge both of those and take that break. And that's the permission that I needed to do that. And you heal, and one day you're not really angry anymore. And
Isn't that the best?
yeah,
I mean,
and it's
talk about freedom. It's such an incredible freedom. And I just actually love that word grace because it's not equilibrium. Grace isn't like a tit for tat. I remember I wrote a poem about it, but one day it just swooshes in and you realize, wow, okay, that's grace. I gotta cruise on this one because it's the end of the hour and we could do 15 million interviews. So
we
I'd
could.
love to be on your podcast and do a reverse up. But what would you
Let's
like
do
to
it.
tell the audiences as we close up?
I would like to say you'll be okay. I have learned to let go of results and just if you do the work and you do it until you're tired and allow yourself rest and allow feedback in, get help, read books, get help, and then do it over and over again, you'll be okay. And your life may look different than what you expected, but maybe different is better.
Yeah, boy, certainly different was better for you. Better than I don't even like the idea of thinking about you smoking cigarettes. I'm
Me either.
still upset about that. Oh my gosh. Well, Matthew, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I see you. I'm so grateful for you. And I'm looking forward to watching us both move forward together, arm in arm, living in a place of assertive vulnerability and grace and power and perseverance to be the change makers in this world as we shift through these changes. So thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Me too. Thank you.
And thank you to all the viewers and listeners of Master Your Life. If you like this episode, I would love a share and a follow. And until next time, remember, you're going to be okay. And let go of the results and do the work and lean in to who you are and who you came here to be. Peace, everyone.